Most people think happiness comes from getting what you want, but ancient Stoics discovered the secret is actually wanting what you already have. For 30 days, I completely rewired my brain using 2,000-year-old philosophy that modern neuroscience now proves actually works. If you're tired of feeling anxious about things outside your control, constantly comparing yourself to others, or getting emotionally hijacked by daily frustrations, you're not alone. Research shows that 85% of what we worry about never actually happens. Yet we still let these phantom fears control our decisions and drain our energy. I decided to live exactly like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca for an entire month, following their specific daily practices and mental frameworks. What happened shocked me and completely changed how I handle stress, setbacks, and success. Harvard researchers recently confirmed that Stoic techniques can reduce anxiety by up to 42% in just 4 weeks, which explains why CEOs, athletes, and Navy SEALs use these same methods today. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete blueprint for building unshakable inner strength and emotional resilience that no external circumstance can touch. You'll discover the counterintuitive mindset shifts that transformed my worst days into opportunities for growth, and how you can start seeing results within 24 hours. Part 1. The Reverse Psychology Paradox. You know what's absolutely insane about how most people handle fear and anxiety? They try to push negative thoughts away, avoid worst-case scenarios, and convince themselves everything will be fine. But here's the thing that blew my mind during my 30-day Stoic experiment. The ancient philosophers did the exact opposite, and it completely transformed how I deal with stress. This first technique out of 7 that I'm going to share with you today sounds counterintuitive, but it's backed by modern neuroscience and used by Navy SEALs, professional athletes, and Fortune 500 CEOs. It's called the Reverse Psychology Paradox, and when I started practicing it on day 3 of my experiment, something incredible happened. Instead of my usual morning routine of checking social media and immediately feeling anxious about my day, I began deliberately imagining everything that could go wrong. I know it sounds crazy, but stay with me here. The Stoics called this negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum, and Marcus Aurelius practiced it every single morning before leading the Roman Empire. Here's what happened when I tried it. On day 5, I spent 5 minutes visualizing losing my job, my relationship ending, and my health failing. But here's the twist. After each visualization, I focused on appreciating what I actually had right now. The contrast was electric. Suddenly, my real problems seemed manageable, and I felt genuinely grateful for things I'd been taking for granted. The science behind this is fascinating. When you mentally rehearse difficulties, your amygdala, that part of your brain responsible for fight or flight responses, becomes less reactive to actual stressors. It's like giving yourself an emotional vaccine. You're building immunity to life's inevitable challenges before they happen. By day 10, something remarkable occurred. My boss delivered some harsh feedback during a meeting, and instead of my usual spiral of anxiety and self-doubt, I felt this strange calm. I'd already imagined worse scenarios that morning, so this felt like a minor inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. Think about how much mental energy you waste worrying about things that might happen. The average person spends 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're currently doing, and most of that mental chatter involves worry and stress. But when you deliberately confront your fears in a controlled way, you're training your brain to respond differently when real challenges arise. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology is just catching up to. Avoidance makes fear stronger, but controlled exposure makes you stronger. When you stop running from uncomfortable thoughts and start engaging with them strategically, you develop what psychologists call stress inoculation. Here's your immediate action step, and I want you to try this tonight before you go to bed. Spend exactly 5 minutes imagining losing something you truly value. Maybe your health, your job, or someone you love. Really feel the potential loss. Then, shift your attention to the fact that you still have these things right now in this moment. Notice how much more grateful you feel. This isn't about being negative or pessimistic. It's about building anti-fragility, the ability to get stronger from stressors rather than just surviving them. When you practice negative visualization regularly, you're essentially doing mental weightlifting. Each difficult scenario you imagine and overcome in your mind makes you more resilient in reality. By the end of week 2, I noticed I was sleeping better, making decisions faster, and feeling more confident in uncertain situations. The constant background anxiety that had been my companion for years started to fade. I wasn't avoiding difficult conversations or putting off challenging tasks because I'd already mentally prepared for much worse outcomes. The beautiful paradox is this: by regularly contemplating loss, you become more grateful for what you have. By imagining failure, you become more resilient to setbacks. By rehearsing difficulty, you develop genuine confidence that you can handle whatever life throws at you. This is just the beginning of what I discovered during my 30-day Stoic journey. The next technique I'm going to share with you completely revolutionized how I measure success and self-worth, and it might be the most liberating thing you ever learn about achievement and happiness. Part 2. The Internal Scorecard Revolution. After 2 weeks of practicing negative visualization, I thought I understood what it meant to think like a Stoic. But then, I discovered something that completely shattered my understanding of success, achievement, and self-worth. This second technique out of 7 literally changed the game for how I approach every challenge in my life. Most people are walking around with an invisible scorecard that's completely controlled by other people. Your worth goes up when you get likes, praise, promotions, or external recognition. Your worth crashes when you face criticism, rejection, or failure. You're essentially giving strangers and circumstances the power to determine how you feel about yourself every single day. But the Stoics figured out something revolutionary 2,000 years ago that modern psychology is just beginning to understand. They developed what I call the internal scorecard revolution. And when I implemented this during week 3 of my experiment, everything changed. Here's what hit me like a lightning bolt. Marcus Aurelius was literally the most powerful man in the world. He could have measured his worth by his empire, his wealth, or his achievements. Instead, he wrote in his personal journal that the only things that mattered were his character, his effort, and his response to circumstances. Not the outcomes, not what other people thought, just how he chose to show up. This blew my mind, because I realized I'd been keeping score completely wrong my entire life. I was measuring success by things I couldn't fully control: other people's reactions, market conditions, lucky breaks, timing. Meanwhile, I was ignoring the only things I actually had complete power over: my effort, my integrity, and my response to whatever happened. On day 15, I decided to experiment with this internal scorecard approach. I had a big presentation at work that I'd been stressing about for weeks. Instead of measuring success by whether I got the promotion or impressed my boss, I decided to measure it purely by whether I prepared thoroughly, spoke authentically, and handled questions with grace. Something magical happened. The pressure evaporated. I wasn't performing for approval anymore. I was simply committed to excellence in the areas I could control. The presentation went better than any I'd ever given, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I was focused on doing my best work, regardless of the outcome. The neuroscience behind this is incredible. When you shift from external validation to internal standards, you activate what psychologists call intrinsic motivation. Your dopamine system stops depending on unpredictable external rewards and starts responding to the satisfaction of personal excellence. You become literally less addicted to other people's opinions. By day 20, I noticed something profound. Criticism didn't devastate me anymore because my self-worth wasn't tied to being right or popular. Praise felt nice, but didn't create an emotional high because I wasn't depending on it for my sense of value. I was becoming psychologically independent in a way I'd never experienced. Think about the areas of your life where you're currently keeping external score. your social media metrics, your bank account, your relationship status, your job title. These aren't inherently bad things. But when they become your primary measure of worth, you're essentially volunteering to be emotionally unstable. The internal scorecard revolution means asking different questions. Instead of, did I win? You ask, did I give my best effort? Instead of, do they like me? You ask, am I being authentic? Instead of, did I get what I wanted? You ask, did I respond with character? Here's your immediate action step, and this might be the most important thing you do this week. Write down 3 current situations where you're focused on outcomes you can't fully control. Maybe it's a job interview, a relationship conflict, or a creative project. For each situation, identify what you can control completely. Your preparation, your attitude, your effort, your integrity. Then, make a commitment. Commit to excellence only in the areas you control, and let go of attachment to the specific outcomes. This doesn't mean you stop caring about results. It means you stop letting results determine your self-worth. The beautiful thing about the internal scorecard is that it's actually the best strategy for achieving external success, too. When you stop performing for approval and start focusing on genuine excellence, people notice. When you stop being desperate for specific outcomes and start being committed to your character, opportunities multiply. During my final week of this experiment, I got promoted at work. But here's the incredible part. It barely affected my mood because my sense of worth was no longer dependent on external achievements. I was proud of the work I'd done and the character I'd shown, regardless of whether anyone else recognized it. This internal scorecard approach is just one piece of the Stoic puzzle. The next technique I discovered takes this even further by showing you how to transform your biggest obstacles into your greatest advantages. It's based on a quote from Marcus Aurelius that will completely change how you view problems and setbacks. Part 3. The Obstacle as Path Inversion. 3 weeks into my Stoic experiment, I faced the biggest professional setback I'd experienced in years. A project I'd been working on for months got canceled, my team was reassigned, and I felt like a complete failure. But then I remembered something Marcus Aurelius wrote that completely flipped my understanding of obstacles and challenges. This third technique out of 7 is probably the most counterintuitive thing the Stoics taught, and when I finally understood it, it revolutionized how I approach every difficulty in my life. Marcus Aurelius said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." At first, this sounded like philosophical word salad. How can an obstacle become a path? How can something that blocks you actually help you move forward? But during week 4 of my experiment, I experienced this principle in action, and it was mind-blowing. Here's what I discovered. Most people see obstacles as evidence that they're on the wrong path. When something goes wrong, they assume they should pivot, quit, or try something completely different. But the Stoics understood that obstacles aren't roadblocks. They're navigation systems, pointing you toward exactly what you need to develop. Think about it this way. If you're trying to build muscle, resistance isn't your enemy. It's literally the mechanism that makes you stronger. Every obstacle contains the exact ingredients needed for your next level of growth. When my project got cancelled, instead of seeing it as a failure, I started asking different questions. What was this obstacle trying to teach me? What skills was it forcing me to develop? What opportunities might be hidden inside this apparent setback? The answers were incredible. The cancellation forced me to communicate more clearly with leadership, which improved my presentation skills. It gave me time to work on a different project that aligned better with my strengths. It taught me resilience and adaptability in ways that success never could have. The science behind this approach is fascinating. When you reframe obstacles as information rather than punishment, you activate your brain's problem-solving networks instead of its threat detection systems. Instead of fight or flight responses, you get curiosity and creativity. Instead of stress hormones, you get the neurotransmitters associated with learning and growth. By day 25, I'd completely changed how I responded to difficulties. A difficult client became an opportunity to practice patience and communication. A tight deadline became a chance to improve my efficiency and focus. A criticism became valuable feedback for professional development. Here's what most people miss about obstacles. They're not random punishments from the universe. They're precisely calibrated challenges designed to develop whatever you're currently lacking. If you're avoiding difficult conversations, life will send you situations that require courage. If you're weak in leadership, you'll face circumstances that demand you step up. The obstacle as path inversion means looking for the gift inside every challenge. Not in a superficial, everything happens for a reason way, but in a practical, what specific skills is this situation forcing me to develop way. Every obstacle is a customized training program for your next level of capability. Here's your immediate action step, and this might completely change your relationship with your current challenges. Identify your biggest obstacle right now. Maybe it's a difficult relationship, a financial challenge, or a professional setback. Write down 3 specific ways this obstacle could actually accelerate your growth or reveal new opportunities. Don't just think positive thoughts about it. Get practical. What skills is this challenge forcing you to develop? What weaknesses is it exposing that you need to strengthen? What doors might it be closing so that better doors can open? During my final days of the experiment, something remarkable happened. I stopped seeing problems as problems and started seeing them as curriculum. Every difficulty became a course in the University of Life, and I became genuinely excited about what I might learn from each challenge. This shift in perspective is incredibly powerful, but the Stoics took it even deeper. The next technique I discovered shows you how to separate facts from the stories you tell yourself about those facts, and this might be the most liberating thing you ever learn about human psychology. Part 4, the emotional archaeology method. On day 22 of my Stoic experiment, I had what I can only describe as a psychological breakthrough. I was stuck in traffic, running late for an important meeting, and I could feel my stress levels skyrocketing. My heart was racing, my jaw was clenched, and I was creating elaborate stories about how this would ruin my entire day. But then I remembered this 4th technique out of 7 that the Stoics practiced religiously, and in that moment, everything changed. I call it the emotional archaeology method, and it's based on a simple but profound realization that most of your suffering comes not from what happens to you, but from the stories you tell yourself about what happens to you. Here's what hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't upset about being stuck in traffic. I was upset about my interpretation of being stuck in traffic. The actual facts were simple. Cars weren't moving. I was sitting in my vehicle. Time was passing. Everything else, the catastrophic predictions, the self-criticism, the anger at other drivers, was just stories I was creating in my head. The Stoics understood something that modern cognitive behavioral therapy is based on. Between every stimulus and your emotional response, there's a hidden layer of interpretation. Most people skip right over this layer and assume their emotional reactions are directly caused by external events, but that's not how psychology actually works. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of the most influential philosophers in history, said it perfectly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But here's the deeper insight. Your reaction isn't to what happened, it's to your interpretation of what happened. When I started practicing emotional archaeology during week 4, I began examining my initial judgments about every situation before letting them trigger emotional responses. It was like becoming a detective of my own thoughts, digging beneath the surface reactions to uncover the hidden assumptions and interpretations creating my emotional experience. The traffic jam became my first real test. Instead of staying stressed, I started separating facts from interpretations. Fact, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. Interpretation, this will ruin my professional reputation and everyone will think I'm unreliable. Fact, I have no control over traffic patterns. Interpretation, I should have left earlier, and this is entirely my fault. Something incredible happened when I made this distinction. The facts felt manageable, even neutral. All the emotional charge was attached to my interpretations, not to reality itself. I could choose different interpretations that were equally valid, but much more empowering. The neuroscience behind this is remarkable. When you create space between stimulus and response, by examining your interpretations, you're literally activating your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for conscious choice and emotional regulation. You're moving from automatic reactions to conscious responses. By day 25, I was using emotional archaeology everywhere. A critical email from my boss became an opportunity to practice resilience and communication skills. A friend canceling plans became a chance for unexpected alone time. A financial setback became information about my budgeting systems rather than evidence of personal failure. Here's what most people never realize. You're constantly creating stories about everything that happens to you, but these stories feel so automatic and natural that you mistake them for facts. Someone doesn't text you back quickly, and you create a story about being ignored. You make a mistake at work, and you create a story about being incompetent. You face a setback, and you create a story about being unlucky. But here's the liberating truth. If you're creating these stories anyway, you might as well create empowering ones. Instead of, I'm being ignored, try, they must be busy with something important. Instead of, I'm incompetent, try, I'm learning and improving through experience. Instead of, I'm unlucky, try, this is valuable information for making better decisions. Here's your immediate action step. And this might be the most powerful psychological tool you ever develop. The next time you feel upset, angry, or anxious about something, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? Then separate the facts from your interpretations. Write down the actual facts, just the observable, objective reality. Then write down your interpretations, the meanings, predictions, and judgments you're adding to those facts. Notice how much of your emotional reaction is connected to interpretations rather than facts. The beautiful thing about emotional archaeology is that it gives you choice. You don't have to believe the first story your mind creates about any situation. You can examine your interpretations, question their accuracy, and choose more empowering perspectives that are equally valid. During my final week of the experiment, this technique became second nature. I wasn't at the mercy of my automatic reactions anymore. I had space between what happened and how I responded. And in that space, I found freedom. This ability to separate facts from stories is incredibly powerful. But the Stoics had an even more profound practice that puts everything into perspective. The next technique involves contemplating something that most people avoid thinking about. But when approached correctly, it becomes the ultimate tool for clarity and gratitude. Part 5. The Death Meditation Advantage. On day 26 of my Stoic experiment, I did something that sounds morbid but turned out to be one of the most life-affirming practices I've ever tried. I spent 20 minutes contemplating my own death, not in a depressing or anxious way, but as a deliberate philosophical exercise that completely transformed my priorities and perspective. This fifth technique out of 7 might sound dark, but the Stoics called it memento mori, remember you will die, and they practiced it not to be depressing, but to become more alive. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of mortality constantly, and it made him one of the most effective leaders in human history. Here's what I discovered that morning. When you regularly contemplate the temporary nature of everything in your life, two incredible things happen. First, trivial problems shrink to their actual size. Second, meaningful relationships and experiences expand to fill the space. I started my death meditation by imagining this was my last day on earth. What would matter to me? What would I regret not doing? What worries would suddenly seem ridiculous? The answers were immediate and crystal clear. I would spend time with people I love, express gratitude for experiences I'd taken for granted, and stop wasting mental energy on things that wouldn't matter in my final moments. The contrast with how I'd been living was shocking. I was spending hours worrying about social media metrics, office politics, and minor inconveniences that wouldn't even register if I knew I only had days left. Meanwhile, I was taking for granted relationships, health, and simple pleasures that would become infinitely precious if I knew they were ending. Modern psychology has a term for this: mortality salience. And research shows that contemplating death actually makes people more grateful, more present-focused, and more aligned with their deepest values. It's not depressing, it's clarifying. By day 28, my morning death meditation had become the highlight of my routine. I would spend 5 minutes imagining this was my last day, then transition into deep gratitude for the fact that it wasn't. The appreciation I felt for ordinary moments became almost overwhelming in the best possible way. Here's what the Stoics understood that most people miss. Death isn't the opposite of life. It's what gives life meaning. Without scarcity, nothing would have value. Without endings, nothing would feel precious. Without mortality, there would be no urgency to love, create, or grow. Think about how you spend your mental energy on a typical day. How much time goes to worry about things that won't matter in a year? How much attention goes to grudges that won't exist in a decade? How much focus goes to achievements that won't be remembered in a century? The death meditation isn't about being morbid, it's about being realistic. You have a limited number of days, and each one you waste on trivial concerns is one you can't get back. When you regularly remember this, you naturally start investing your time and energy in things that actually matter. During week 4 of my experiment, I noticed dramatic changes in my behavior. I stopped putting off important conversations because there would be time later. I started expressing appreciation more freely, because I realized how quickly people could disappear from my life. I began taking risks on meaningful projects because I understood that security is an illusion anyway. The science behind mortality salience is fascinating. When people are reminded of death in controlled studies, they become more generous, more authentic, and more focused on intrinsic rather than extrinsic values. They spend more time with family, less time on materialism, and more energy on personal growth. Here's your immediate action step, and this might be the most important thing you do this week. Tomorrow morning, spend 5 minutes imagining this is your last day on Earth. Really feel the weight of that possibility. Then ask yourself, what would I regret not doing? What would suddenly seem unimportant? What would I want to express or experience while I still could? Then, and this is crucial, let the gratitude wash over you when you realize this isn't actually your last day. Feel appreciation for the ordinary miracle of having more time, more opportunities, more chances to love and grow and create. Don't make this a one-time exercise. The Stoics practiced memento mori daily because the clarity it provides fades quickly when you get caught up in daily routines. Make it a regular practice to remember that everything in your life is temporary, including your life itself. By day 30 of my experiment, death meditation had become a superpower for decision-making. When facing any choice, I would ask, if I only had a year left, what would I choose? The answer was always clear and always led me toward what mattered most. This practice of contemplating mortality is profound, but the Stoics had another technique that might be even more practical for daily life. The next method involves deliberately choosing discomfort to build resilience, and it's used by elite athletes, military special forces, and anyone serious about developing mental toughness. Part 6. The Voluntary Discomfort Training. By day 28 of my Stoic experiment, I thought I understood what it meant to be mentally tough, but then I discovered this 6th technique out of 7 that completely redefined my relationship with comfort and challenge. The Stoics called it voluntary discomfort, and when I started practicing it, I realized I'd been accidentally making myself weak by avoiding every minor hardship. Here's what blew my mind. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, regularly slept on the floor, ate simple bread and water, and wore rough clothes. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, practiced voluntary poverty and physical discomfort. These weren't acts of self-punishment. They were strategic training for resilience. The concept is brilliant in its simplicity. If you only experience comfort, you become fragile when discomfort inevitably arrives. But if you regularly choose small hardships, you build what I call your discomfort muscle, the ability to remain calm and capable when life gets difficult. On day 29, I decided to test this principle. I took a cold shower, slept on the floor without my mattress, and ate nothing but rice and vegetables for the entire day. My first reaction was resistance and complaints from my brain about why this was unnecessary suffering. But something remarkable happened after the initial discomfort. I felt incredibly strong and capable. Not physically stronger, though there was some of that, but psychologically more resilient. I'd proven to myself that I could handle discomfort with grace. I'd voluntarily stepped outside my comfort zone and survived just fine. The neuroscience behind voluntary discomfort is fascinating. When you expose yourself to controlled stressors, you're literally rewiring your nervous system to be less reactive to stress in general. It's like vaccination for your stress response system. You're building immunity to difficulty by exposing yourself to small doses of it. Modern elite performers understand this intuitively. Navy SEALs train in conditions far worse than they'll face in actual missions. Professional athletes practice at intensities higher than competition demands. Successful entrepreneurs deliberately put themselves in uncomfortable situations to build confidence and adaptability. During my final days of the experiment, I expanded my voluntary discomfort practice. I woke up an hour earlier than necessary and used the time for meditation instead of sleeping in. I left my phone in another room during meals instead of scrolling mindlessly. I walked instead of driving when the weather was unpleasant. Each small act of choosing discomfort over comfort was like a deposit in my resilience bank account. When actual challenges arose, a difficult conversation with my boss, an unexpected financial expense, a rejection from someone I was interested in, I found myself responding with calmness rather than panic. Here's what most people miss about comfort. Comfort isn't bad, but dependency on comfort is dangerous. When you need everything in your environment to be perfect before you can function well, you've made yourself incredibly vulnerable to circumstances beyond your control. The Stoics understood that life is fundamentally uncertain and often uncomfortable. Instead of being victims of this reality, they chose to prepare for it systematically. They built strength by lifting weights of difficulty before life forced them to carry them. Think about your current relationship with discomfort. How do you react when you're too hot, too cold, hungry, tired, or facing minor inconveniences? Do you immediately try to fix the situation? Or can you remain calm and capable while experiencing discomfort? Here's your immediate action step. And this might be the most character-building thing you do this month. Choose one minor comfort to eliminate for the next week. Maybe it's hot showers, sleeping in late, your phone during meals, or always having your favorite snacks available. The key is to choose something that's genuinely uncomfortable, but not harmful. You're not trying to punish yourself. You're trying to build resilience by proving you can thrive without perfect conditions. During week 4 of my experiment, voluntary discomfort became almost addictive in the best possible way. Each time I chose the harder path when an easier one was available, I felt stronger and more confident. I was becoming anti-fragile, getting better from stress rather than just surviving it. The beautiful paradox of voluntary discomfort is that it actually increases your capacity for genuine enjoyment. When you regularly experience simplicity, luxury feels more special. When you practice going without, having feels more precious. When you build tolerance for discomfort, comfort becomes a gift rather than a requirement. This practice of voluntary discomfort is incredibly powerful, but there's one final Stoic technique that ties everything together. It's a simple framework for organizing your entire mental life around what you can and cannot control. And it might be the most practical wisdom philosophy has ever produced. Part 7. The Circle of Control. GPS. On the final day of my Stoic experiment, I realized that everything I'd learned over the past month could be organized around one simple but revolutionary framework. This seventh and final technique is what I call the Circle of Control, GPS, and it's based on the most fundamental principle of Stoic philosophy. Epictetus, who went from being a slave to one of history's most influential teachers, said something that changed my life. Some things are within our power, while others are not. That sounds almost stupidly simple, but when you really understand and apply this distinction, it becomes the ultimate guide for where to invest your mental and emotional energy. Here's how the Stoics organized reality into 3 distinct circles. The inner circle contains things you control completely: your thoughts, your responses, your effort, your character. The middle circle contains things you can influence partially: other people's reactions, outcomes of your projects, your health and fitness. The outer circle contains things completely outside your control: the weather, other people's choices, global events, the past and future. The revolutionary insight is this: all mental suffering comes from trying to control things in the middle and outer circles, as if they were in your inner circle. You make yourself miserable when you need other people to behave certain ways, when you require specific outcomes from your efforts, or when you fight against circumstances beyond your influence. During my 30 days of Stoic living, I'd been unconsciously applying this framework through all the other techniques. Negative visualization taught me to accept what's outside my control. The internal scorecard focused my attention on what I control completely. The obstacle as path inversion helped me influence what I partially control. Emotional archaeology separated my responses, inner circle, from events, outer circle. On day 30, I decided to make this framework explicit. I drew 3 circles on a piece of paper and started categorizing everything I was currently worried about or focused on. The results were shocking and liberating. Most of my stress was coming from trying to control outer circle things: whether people would like my work, if the economy would affect my job security, what might happen in various uncertain situations. I was wasting enormous amounts of mental energy on things I had zero power to change. Meanwhile, I was neglecting many inner circle opportunities: improving my skills, developing better daily habits, practicing gratitude, strengthening my character. I was ignoring the areas where I had complete power while obsessing over areas where I had none. The middle circle was where I could make the biggest impact through strategic influence. Instead of trying to control whether people liked me, I could influence their perception by being genuinely helpful and authentic. Instead of trying to control whether my projects succeeded, I could influence the odds by doing excellent work and seeking feedback. Here's what happened when I realigned my energy with this framework. My stress levels dropped dramatically because I stopped fighting battles I couldn't win. My effectiveness increased because I focused on areas where effort actually made a difference. My relationships improved because I stopped trying to control other people and started being more intentional about how I showed up. The Circle of Control, GPS, became my decision-making framework for everything. Before reacting to any situation, I would ask, which circle is this in? If it was outer circle, I practiced acceptance. If it was middle circle, I focused on influence rather than control. If it was inner circle, I took complete responsibility. Think about how much mental energy you currently spend in each circle. Are you worrying about things you can't control? Are you neglecting things you can control? Are you trying to control things you can only influence? Here's your immediate and final action step from this entire experiment. Draw 3 circles on a piece of paper. Label them complete control, partial influence, and no control. Then categorize your current worries, goals, and focus areas into these 3 circles. For everything in the outer circle, practice acceptance and let go of the need to control outcomes. For everything in the middle circle, focus on influence strategies rather than control tactics. For everything in the inner circle, take complete ownership and invest your best energy. This simple framework will transform your relationship with stress, success, and satisfaction. Instead of being at the mercy of circumstances and other people's choices, you become the director of your own experience by focusing exclusively on what's actually within your power. After 30 days of living like a Stoic, this circle of control GPS became second nature. I stopped wasting energy on things I couldn't change and started becoming excellent at things I could. The result was a level of inner peace and practical effectiveness I'd never experienced before. Your Stoic transformation starts now. 30 days ago, I started this experiment thinking Stoicism was just ancient philosophy with some practical tips for handling stress. I was completely wrong. What I discovered was a comprehensive operating system for human consciousness that's as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. These 7 techniques, the reverse psychology paradox, the internal scorecard revolution, the obstacle as path inversion, the emotional archaeology method, the death meditation advantage, the voluntary discomfort training, and the circle of control GPS, aren't just interesting ideas. They're practical tools that can completely transform how you experience reality. The most remarkable thing about my 30-day journey wasn't any single dramatic moment. It was the gradual but profound shift in my baseline experience of life. Problems that used to trigger anxiety became opportunities for growth. Setbacks that used to devastate me became information for better decisions. Uncertainty that used to paralyze me became the natural backdrop for courageous action. I'm not saying these 30 days may be perfect or eliminated all challenges from my life. What they did was give me a reliable framework for responding to whatever life brings. Instead of being at the mercy of circumstances, emotions, and other people's choices, I now have practical tools for maintaining inner stability regardless of external chaos. The beautiful thing about Stoic philosophy is that it's not just theory. It's meant to be lived. Marcus Aurelius developed these ideas while leading an empire and fighting wars. Epictetus refined them while transitioning from slavery to freedom. Seneca applied them while navigating wealth, politics, and personal relationships. Your life might look different from theirs, but the fundamental challenges remain the same. You'll face uncertainty, loss, criticism, and setbacks. You'll struggle with anxiety, comparison, and the temptation to control things beyond your power. The question isn't whether these challenges will come, it's whether you'll be prepared when they do. Start with just one technique that resonated most strongly with you. Maybe it's the morning practice of negative visualization or the evening reflection using the circle of control GPS. Maybe it's implementing an internal scorecard for your current projects, or beginning to practice emotional archaeology when you feel upset. Don't try to transform everything at once. The Stoics believed in gradual, consistent progress rather than dramatic overnight changes. Pick one practice, commit to it for a week, and notice what shifts in your experience. Then gradually add other techniques as they become natural and automatic. Remember, this isn't about becoming emotionless or pessimistic. It's about becoming anti-fragile, getting stronger from life's inevitable challenges rather than just surviving them. It's about developing the kind of inner stability that allows you to be fully present for joy, love, and beauty while remaining grounded when difficulties arise. The ancient Stoics believed that philosophy should be practical medicine for the human soul. After 30 days of testing their prescriptions, I can tell you they were absolutely right. These tools work, and they can work for you too. Your transformation starts with the next choice you make.
Will you practice negative visualization tonight, before bed? Will you identify what's in your circle of control right now? Will you choose an uncomfortable path when an easier one is available? 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote in his personal journal, "You have power over your mind. not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That power is still available to you today. The only question is whether you're ready to claim it.